Let's now shift our focus to our big debate this hour. A statue in Tamil Nadu's Sri Rangam is a warning from our ancestors. It depicts the Chinese backstabbing India. Yes, while China continues to peddle its ancient past to make modern claims using old civilizational maps, today we're going to be busting some of these biggest myths, as well as lies which have been peddled for too long now by the Chinese Communist Party. We're today going to be talking about how it was India and not China, which is and continues to be Asia's cultural superpower. The sixth phase of excavation is underway in Kiladi, which has unearthed several treasures from our ancient past. And in fact, there are many other treasures which still continue to be unearthed there. India's cultural influence was not just limited to the subcontinent, but spread to many other parts of Asia as well. Island and a city, in fact, named Ayutthaya. After Ayodhya, a 1,000-year-old shivling was recently also discovered in Vietnam. Meanwhile, the Ramayana, remember, is still performed in Indonesia. Our ancestors were right. China does have a habit, of course, of deceit, but it's time perhaps now to show the world how it is India and not China, which is Asia's cultural powerhouse, completely busting the dragon's civilizational claim and lie. And to help us do that, we have a special panel joining us today on the broadcast. We have with us at this point Rahul Ishwar, activist. He's joining us live. Professor Kapil Kumar, historian, is also live with us. Ambassador Deepak Bora, former diplomat and former secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs, is also with us. And Dr. P.R. Deepak, Indo-China analyst, also joins the panel at this point. Let me begin with you first, Dr. Deepak, if I can. On how perhaps now it is time to bust this claim that China is the civilizational powerhouse of Asia. That China is the only country that has such an ancient civilization and so much of history, which it wants to showcase to the entire world, and not India.
I think, as far as civilization is concerned, India is equally an ancient civilization and one of the living civilization. And Tagore, in fact, have said that, it is the civilization where the lamp, of the civilization has never died out. So therefore, it is a living civilization and its cultural influence. So not only in Southeast Asia, we call it Indic civilizations, but it goes beyond into the Sinic civilization as well. So that is the Chinese civilization. That means the Indian civilization is facets, various facets, cultural facets. So they have deeply influenced the Chinese civilization also. For example, if we talk about, the circulation of ideas, our Buddhism, from India, it totally changed the landscape of entire Northeast Asia, starting from China. And then if we talk about India's literature, especially our classics, Mahabharata and Ramayana, making inroads into not only in the Indic civilizational world, but also inside China. There is a huge influence. In fact, the stories, from especially from Mahabharata and Ramayana, so they have always been there in Chinese folk tales and folk traditions, and even now, and forget about this. I'm telling you the truth that the language itself, the Chinese language itself, it has been, hugely influenced by our language system, especially the Sanskrit. And I will reveal that there are 35,000 Indian vocabularies even now present in Chinese, language. So that is huge. But only thing is that it's only those people who know a bit about China, those who know a bit about our own civilization, that they get to know about these facts. And literature, for example, India's literature, beyond these two epics, Chinese genres, various Chinese genres, they were influenced by Indian literature, literary tradition. And also, you can say the Chinese puppetry, the Chinese drama, during Yuan dynasty, especially the Mongol dynasty in China. So it was hugely influenced by our tradition. So
that's a very valid point.
Various facets, of Chinese civilization. So they were highly influenced by India.
I'll come back to that point of yours,
this tradition that various pilgrims from China, so they came to India in search of those classic.
Ambassador Deepak Bora, the fact here is that, because we're talking about our ancient structures and artifacts, etc., which are still being unearthed at Kiladi. One statue, as we just pointed out at the start of the broadcast, shows and foresees the Chinese deceit. So our ancestors perhaps were trying to warn us about the Chinese after all. Perhaps it's time to pay heed to them, and perhaps it's time to celebrate our ancestors and our ancestry a bit more as well, isn't it?
Thank you very much, Mr. Singh, for this opportunity to be on your program with such a distinguished panel of savants who understand the nuances in our relationship with China much better than I do. But yes, the Kiradi exploration, the excavation have been truly remarkable. It shows that 2,500 years ago during the Sangam period, this is a place, anyway, we've had a great deal of contact with China because Middle Eastern products first came to the Tamil coast and then from there across through Sri Vijaya went to China, to the eastern seaboard of China. So here I do wish to point out that many of my Chinese friends have told me that when they were young, their parents used to say that if you behave well, then in your next birth, you will be born in the Western heaven, i.e. India. There has always been this fascination with India, this perhaps today grudging acceptance that we were a superior civilization. Now, a very famous professor, I shall not name, why don't I name him, Francis Fukuyama, said something very interesting. He's highlighted the vulnerability of China to what he calls the bad emperor syndrome. There have been golden periods in Chinese history, but there also have been many more periods of terrible emperors. I mean, in 3,700 years ago was a chap called Xia Jie. He was known as the biggest cheat and thug in history. And even today in Chinese literature, they say that, don't do a Xia Jie because then your tyranny will be evicted, you'll be thrown out. That's part of Chinese metaphor. This chap, Yang Guang in the 7th century, hungry to invade his neighbors, invaded Vietnam, he invaded Korea, got clobbered. And why did he invade them? Because some ambassador from those places didn't bow low enough before the chap. He tried to repair the Great Wall. I think 6 million Chinese died. I mean, and the greatest, of course, the emperor, if I may use that term, Mao Zedong, who killed 50 million Chinese during the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. So they've had consistently this bad emperor syndrome. And I'm sorry to say that today we are seeing the same thing with this gentleman. It is the bad emperor syndrome. Now, you've quoted something from the China Times. So the China Times is a rag. It's not read in China itself. It's meant for outsiders, for foreigners. The Chinese don't tell their own people about what is happening. Because the moment you start issuing warnings to India in your national media, then they'll say, hey guys, have you got a problem with India? Tell us about it. And in all this business about teaching us a lesson in 1962, Mr. Singh, I lost family in 1962. And I know what the pain is. But we were very good students. We learned the lesson so well, my dear Chinese friends, that now we are better than our teachers.
Indeed. Professor Kapil Kumar, we've had several programs on NewsX, of course, where we've spoken about Kiladi's excavation. We've spoken about Rakhigadi excavation. These are all signs that our heritage, still needs to be unearthed, perhaps much more. These are all signs, of course, that we need to talk about our authentic history. Rather than, of course, the Western history that's been given to us or the history that some so-called historians have given to us. More efforts need to be done to promote this and, of course, talk about this and celebrate this much more in this new post-COVID world in which India is going to be assuming much more significance than ever before.
Is that addressed to me or to
Professor Kapil Kumar? You have to unmute yourself, Professor Kumar. You'll have to unmute yourself.
So you have to press a button on your screen. There's a little mic.
You have to unmute yourself. Yes.
You're hearing me now? You're hearing me?
Yes, sir. Yes,
You're
sir.
hearing me? First of all, as I have said in earlier discussions also, that what we need immediately is a creation of a heritage trust at the national level. We should open the private sector.
Okay, unfortunately, I think we're having some technical trouble there with Professor Kumar. We'll come back to him in just a second. Rahul Ishwar, why don't you come in here? Professor Kumar, Okay, we've lost him again. Rahul Ishwar, why don't you come in here? Rahul Ishwar, on, of course, now this ancient history of ours that needs to be perhaps celebrated much more and spoken about in this post-COVID world, Rahul. It needs to be the age of India and the age, of course, of our Indian history and civilization, which we don't talk about, unfortunately, too much.
Any person or any people who are bound to forget their past are condemned to repeat it. We know that China is our neighbor. We had a fair share of good things with them, but we also have many backstabbing and many negative aspects of their history too. If we check objectively the Chinese history, the four most influential people on the history of China were Buddha, Confucius, Lao Tse, and Bodhisattva. Two of them we can definitely claim to be of Indian heritage and Indian culture and civilization. Yes, there is a cultural connect, but the Chinese dragon, especially after the leftist revolution, has their own hidden intent. They want to, even though they are promoting Confucius right now, they want to erase the ancient connect. They are an all-weather friend of Pakistan. They are looking for an opportunity to undermine India. They are looking for an opportunity to undermine the present world order and emerge themselves. So we have to learn from our history, and we have some kind of a troubled past with them. That's a reality that we should never forget. And that's one thing. Maybe it's symbolic, but that's one thing that's there from the Kennedy. Maybe it is past giving us a wake-up call to the present, saying that you should be cautious. And even when in 1962, we had very similar incidents. So I believe it is a symbol, maybe a very metaphoric symbol from the past, giving us a wake-up call that we should be very cautious when we deal with the dragon.
Okay, Professor Kapil Kumar, let's try you once again. If you can hear me now, and I think your video is much more clearer now. Go ahead, sir, Professor Kumar, to the point you were making, and you'll have to unmute yourself again. You'll have to unmute yourself again, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what I was saying is that this is going on every states. You compare the Indian European situation, you compare the others. China has even for future.
Okay, I'm going to do one thing. I think we're going to try and get another audio line to you in just a second. But Dr. Deepak, come in here. Dr. Deepak, come in here. It's not just China, of course, is it? It's and not just South Asia, beg your pardon, is it? Where of course our influence is spread to, but all of Asia. The fact is that there's a city called Ayutthaya in Thailand after Ayodhya. There is the Shivling. Rahul, I'll come to you in a second. Rahul, there is that Shivling in Vietnam as well. There is, of course, in Indonesia, Ramayana, which has been performed as well for ages as well. So, our history, our extent of our influence extends to this entire Asia region. Perhaps it's time to talk more about that, Dr. Deepak, and build these links once again.
Yeah, definitely. So these are important linkages, civilizational linkages, which are extremely important. Especially, our PDX division in Ministry of External Affairs. So they should be doing a great deal of work. I think, of course, now they are doing a bit, but I think it has been neglected, in the past. And we have been, I think, revolving around the narrative which the British historians, so they have written down in history books. So I think it is the high time that around civilizational linkages in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, and I would extend it further to the southern China and Southeast China, and also Southwest China, because these linkages, they go further up north. Not only they are limited to Cambodia and Vietnam, but it go further, the north to China. And I'll give you some examples. This is the route, which they followed from Vietnam further north to China, and also from these Southeast Asian countries to further north in Guangzhou, and also in Fujian. That is the Trento, one of the biggest ports China had. And there are temples excavated, the Hindu temples, where all sort of cultural relics they have been discovered. And in Guizhou, Guangxi area, and there is huge influence of this Ramayana. Ramayana is in their dialect, and of course it has been localized, as it has been localized in Indonesia. But yes, the Chinese has the characters. They are very much the same. In fact, they believe that this war, with the Ravana, it was fought there in their land, including Yunnan, which is one of the nodal points in southwest China. And then from Tali to Yunnan, if you go to further north, of course, the route is different. It's the Central Asian route in Lopnar in Xinjiang. So you will find various, linkages where India was extremely important.
Absolutely.
So I think at this point in time, we need to resurrect, these ancient linkages.
Indeed. I think Rahul also wants to come in at that point.
This shows that, so we
on
have
our Hindu heritage and the extent of it and how it must be celebrated and these links must be established much more. I'm coming to Kapil Kumar in a second.
And it's a true. See, if we look at all these nations, we can see that great influence of India still as a living entity. For example, Indonesia has the official symbol Garuda. Thailand has the official symbol Garuda. And to the surprise of us, even Mongolia's capital Ulaanbaatar's official symbol is Garuda. It is not an eagle, it is Garuda itself. So that means there is a worldwide influence of Indian culture and civilization. But unfortunately, these are the positive points. Let us also talk about the negative point. Unfortunately, we children of India have not been enough aware of it. We have not showcased it to our children. We have not told the world that these are all our heritage. So we have some kind of collective amnesia happening, a collective Alzheimer's disease that has happened to us the past century, maybe because of the British education system. But it is time to shake off our Alzheimer's and to invoke those memories, because then only we can be a cultural soft power, a cultural superpower, and then only we can be a Vishwaguru.
Okay. Kapil Kumar, come in here. Professor Kapil Kumar, come in here on your views finally on this big story.
Yeah. As I was saying, if you look at certain things, the knowledge which ancient India imparted, China has no parallel either to the Vedas or to the Mahabharata or to the Ramayana. Their ancient knowledge comes from Confucius. And rest all knowledge which they have is knowledge which they took from India, whether it was Fayan, whether it was Itsing, whether it was the other traveler. These travelers came here to India, what for? They came here in search of knowledge. And you see the Chinese technique even today, that what China builds today is again not its indigenous technology. It steals from the world. It takes knowledge from the world. So this whole thing, and I think a time has now come that we not only celebrate and say that our Ramayana is there and this thing is there, but we go deeper into it, that how China took knowledge from different parts of the world, how the world gave her knowledge, how India gave knowledge to China to build up and stand wherever it is. And I'd like to say one more thing very interesting here. You look at the Chinese maps, they are very talking of ancient maps. Now the Chinese maps of Qing period and all describe the Chinese wall. And why was this Chinese wall built? Because to save the territories of China. So that was original China. And behind the walls of that China, whatever China has today as its territory, it is all usurped, snatched and taken from others. And it is high time also that we in our maps show what is all outside China wall is occupied territory by China, and recognize those regions and fight for their independence.
Indeed. Deepak Bora, Ambassador Bora, on, of course, the points that some of our panelists earlier were raising, your reaction, but also, Ambassador Bora, on India shying away from celebrating or talking about our past perhaps as much as China. China talks so much about its ancient history. They pride themselves on their language. Indians don't. Rahul agrees with that point. But before I come to him, Ambassador Bora.
Thank you very much. In the presence of experts like Dr. Deepak and Mr. Iswar and Professor Kapil Kumar, it's very difficult for me to add anything. This is perhaps a hangover of this imbecile called Macaulay, who went around famously saying that on one shelf of a British library, there is more wisdom than in all the books that can be found in India. This is one of the things that we have absorbed, and as you rightly pointed out, Mr. Iswar, it's a hangover of our British legacy. Now, China also suffered from this, but not to the extent that we have. The great thing about China is about their claims to be an ancient civilization, sir. Like what they do in their lives, it's based on deceit and fraud. I do not believe, apart from a few periods of golden efflorescence in China, they've really not had a great history. Why do I talk about deceit and treachery being a part of their system? There used to be an emperor character called Gongsheng about 2,800 years ago. He had a concubine who never smiled. It's a very interesting story. So what he did, to make her smile, he went out and yelled, "The barbarians are coming, the barbarians are coming." All the nobles came with their armies to protect this fellow. And then his concubine smiled. And then he repeated this trick every time he wanted her to smile, till the local armies never came when he started screaming. You know, the guy who cried wolf too often. So this deceit, this treachery, this make-believe, this fantasy has been part of their system. One other thing, sir, regrettably, and I accept responsibility as much as anybody else, that our view of Indian history has been very Delhi-centric. Akbar ka beta, Babar ka baak, Aurangzeb, or whatever. But just two people, two personalities in the south of India who fascinate me. Raja Martanda Varma, the famous Battle of Kolachel in 1741.
Thank you for mentioning that.
When he clobbered the Dutch for ever and ever putting an end to their pretensions to rule India. And of course, then the British came in. But the great thing is when the Dutch governor sailed down from Ceylon and met him and said, "Listen, stop doing what you're doing," Martanda Varma said, "Listen, buddy, not only will I smash you, but then I'll invade your country in Europe." This is the first time, sir, the first time, I repeat, the first time in history that a European army was defeated by an Indian indigenous army. The first time in history that a well-formed European army, the Dutch, were beaten by an indigenous army. Second was Rani Abakka Chowdhury of Karnataka. I mean, clobbered the Portuguese in the 16th century. What did the Portuguese do? Finally purchased her husband and then through again deceit and treachery, etc., defeated her.
Absolutely.
The rich history of southern India.
Absolutely. Quick point from Rahul, and then I'll get back Professor Kumari. Yes, Rahul.
Thank you so much. I cannot thank enough for mentioning the Battle of Kolachel and the victory of, I belong to Travancore and I am personally go in good friendship, and we have some close connection with the Travancore royal family. And the erstwhile Maharaja who passed away kept on telling until his days are over that nobody values that past. We are one of the first to defeat a Western force or in the naval battle. See, these things, when you only know that, we get some kind of a pride. See, we can learn about all the other history, but let us learn about our own forefathers.
Why don't we, Professor Kumar? Why don't we, in your view?
The answer is very simple. When the labor structures are given into such people who are out to denounce India, do you expect they will teach our younger generation those things? They will teach them Russian Revolution and Mao's Long March and all those things, and they will not teach us what our own history is. So it's a straight and simple reason this has been done after 47, and particularly after the 1970s, when the Marxists took over for writing history. So either you are writing the dynastic history of Nehru, what he was doing, or Gandhi, what he was doing. Like, you see, you have this song, De Diya Mein Azadi Bina Tir Bina Dhal. Now, this kind of a song humiliates our martyrs, our revolutionaries, our INA, our Azad Fauj, who gave life for the country. But they will not be mentioned in the history books. So it is very happy that channels like you now are bringing up these things, aspects to the public, and social media is playing a big role in bringing up the new history of India.
No, very valid point indeed.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.